Maritime Convoy 2 days reflects deadly attacks Wolfpack of German submarines.
A Wolfpack shadowing us. They'll attack as a group.
Yeah, waiting for nightfall. And we can't see nothing.
The movie begins with a solemn speech about the difficult fate of ordinary American merchants who are forced into danger because of World War II. The US Navy is forced to escort merchant ships along the route from America to Britain. The greatest threat comes from organized groups of German U-boats, the so-called wolf packs. The escort plane reports to the lead destroyer with the call sign Greyhound that it has reached its farthest point and is forced to return to base due to lack of fuel. There are 37 ships in the caravan. Captain Ernst Krause is praying in his cabin. While washing up, he recalls a pre-Christmas meeting with his beloved in California. She gave him slippers and a warship figurine that now sits on his nightstand next to his Bible. The captain wanted to propose to her, but she insisted on discussing it after his return from the war. 50 hours into the air cover rendezvous, the captain takes over the watch from Chief Mate Tommy, who is famous for his love of gypsy music. In 3 days in the Black Pit, the biggest incident becomes a fight between two sailors. They are brought before the captain, and they promise not to disturb the order again. Krause heads to the deck house, where he notices that 2 vessels have deviated from their route to check suspicious waters. A liaison reports a radio intercept of a signal that may belong to a German submarine. The captain orders a search for the submarine and takes control of the ship himself. He also instructs a neighboring ship to replace the Greyhound in the forward position. An alert is declared, and the crew prepares to scramble. The XO tracks a possible target on radar. Greyhound at full speed crashes into the waves of the Atlantic. Suddenly, a submarine surfacing for observation appears on the radar screen. As the distance shortens, the submarine goes deep again. The XO calculates a possible interception route, assuming the Germans will not change speed and course. The captain goes on deck with binoculars, expecting visual contact. The acoustician suspects the boat is turning around, but no propeller noise is heard. Soon, the submarine is detected again at a distance of 1 kilometer. Krause maneuvers the ship, trying to take a convenient position for the attack. The enemy lurks. At a distance of 500 meters, the captain orders to prepare depth bombs. The submarine enters the blind spot sonar, but the acoustician catches the sound of running propellers. The submarine dives under the ship, and Krause orders the bombs to be dropped. No signs of sinking are visible, but suddenly there is an oil slick, a sign of a destroyed submarine. The captain reports success, but does not intend to suspend the caravan. Koch brings him breakfast, but there is no time to eat. The enemy is near. Liaison reports about the upcoming enemy activity ahead on the course. Sailors draw a swastika on board as a sign of victory. But the joy is short-lived. An alarm signal comes from the rear. One of the merchant ships is broken and on fire. The captain sends a rescue ship and sends the Greyhound to the rescue. German submarines lurking underwater are suddenly attacked by a torpedo, which, fortunately, does not reach the target. By maneuvering, the ship successfully avoids the impact. A rescue ship picks up the survivors and returns to the group. Greyhound receives alarming data. 6 enemy subs are detected around the caravan, a classic Wolfpack tactic. The Germans keep their distance, waiting for nightfall. The closest submarine to Greyhound surfaces nearby, but a radar malfunction makes it difficult to observe. The captain gives the order to open fire from the deck guns, but they fail to hit, only forcing the enemy to hide underwater again. There are 36 hours left before air cover appears. Night falls. Krause orders light camouflage and turns off all exterior lights. Suddenly, a flare flies up in the sky. The Germans launch an attack and the Americans respond with volleys of gunfire. Because of light cloaking ships barely avoid collision, diverging literally millimeters. However, one of the submarines squeezes between the ships and attacks, hitting another ship. The Germans again hide under the water. The captain gives the order to prepare depth bombs and instructs the acoustician to track the enemy's movement. The enemies manage to drop a diversionary charge that mimics the noise of the propellers. The Greyhound drops depth charges on the intended target, but wastes ammunition. It is only when it becomes apparent that the target is not moving that the acoustician realizes it was a hoax. At that moment, the tanker that had been hit earlier explodes, as if mocking Krause's failure. He faces a difficult dilemma: rescue the survivors or return to the defense of the caravan. He decides to pick up the survivors. Only 4 manage to be rescued. In the dark night, there is a new explosion. The Germans continue to attack defenseless ships. The commander of one of the subs comes on the air, calling himself a Grey Wolf, and threatens Greyhound with destruction. Krause orders a change of radio frequency without answering the call. Soon 2 subs surface to attack. They manage to torpedo one vessel, but the convoy responds with fire from deck guns. The sky is illuminated by the light of flares requesting help, but some of the ships are immediately destroyed by German attacks. Above this chaos, only the indifferent northern lights continue to flicker through the clouds. Thursday. There are 26 hours left to air cover. During the last attack, the caravan lost 5 ships, 2 more damaged. Krause, who has not slept for over 24 hours, receives a message. One of the ships has spotted the enemy and is attacking. Greyhound rushes to help, but the situation is complicated. There are only 6 depth bombs left on board. Too much has been spent on false targets. The XO reports that the change of course will allow for a day to get into the coverage area of Allied aircraft, which will greatly facilitate the fight against the Wolfpack. We're on red alert. A periscope is sighted directly ahead. Firing on it is not successful. Greyhound and the other ship try to squeeze the sub from both sides. Acoustic picks up the sound of a torpedo. Miraculously, the torpedo passes the stern. The captain gives the command to turn right. Allied depth charges force the sub to surface. She ends up alongside the Greyhound, literally side by side. The ship turns around to take out the enemy, but cannot do so because it risks damaging the Allied ship. Meanwhile, cannons begin firing from the submarine. The Greyhound catches a hit, starting a fire on one of the guns. However, the crew manages to send the submarine to the bottom with return fire. The captain is informed that the fire has been localized. There are no holes below the waterline, but there are losses among the crew. 3 wounded and 3 dead. Koch brings food, but Krause orders an immediate funeral. The crew lines up, the captain reads the Bible, then the engines stop and the remains are lowered into the sea. Greyhound goes to the rear for cover, where he notices that an Allied warship has caught fire and is being towed at low speed. There are 14 hours left of air cover. Night falls. The Allied ship sinks, and its crew requests permission to evacuate to a transport ship. The captain reports that they will soon enter Allied air coverage. Krause calls the XO to discuss a brief message for help. It must be concise so that the Germans cannot intercept information about the caravan's dire situation. They agree on the phrase, "Help wanted." Soon comes the answer from the Allies. An airplane will be sent, and the main thing now, to get to the specified point. The German captain again goes on the air with threats, but Krause immediately orders to change the frequency of communication for protection. XO decodes the message from the Allies. They have appointed a new rendezvous point, a little away from the current course. However, help will arrive earlier, in 4 hours. Friday morning comes, 3 hours before air cover. The caravan steadily keeps its course in the gloomy pre-dawn haze. Exhausted by the 2-day watch without sleep and food, Krause asks to bring him slippers given earlier. Taking off his shoes, the captain exposes his bloody feet, the marks of which remain on the deck. Despite the pain, he remains at his post. There is a report of 2 detected targets. The subs are moving on the surface and preparing to attack. Krause declares an alert and asks Sveznov to bring more coffee. The Germans continue the psychological pressure through the radio airwaves with their characteristic accent, which unpleasantly cuts the hearing of the Americans. Having spotted the enemy periscope, the gunners open fire, but again without success. In response, the submarine fires a torpedo. The captain orders an urgent turn to avoid the blow. The maneuver almost succeeds, but another torpedo approaches from the other side. The first one passes only a few meters from the board, and the ship lurching sharply, forcing sailors to almost fall overboard. The second torpedo only slightly touches the hull, but fortunately does not detonate and goes into the open sea. The German submarine, amazed at such insolence, surfaces to look at the enemy. At this point, she fires a third torpedo, but thanks to the ship's maneuver, it again misses its target. The onboard guns fire at the submarine, raising clouds of water. The captain orders to turn around to use all the guns. This move is successful. The submarine is damaged. However, from the starboard side appears another submarine, and above it in the sky appears a British bomber. He accurately dropped 4 bombs fall on the Germans. Unable to withstand the shelling, the submarine collapses and goes to the bottom. Krause transmits a message to the caravan about the retreat of the remaining submarines and gives an alarm. One Allied plane is still hovering in the sky, and soon a British convoy approaches, requesting communications. The Allies replace the Americans and suggest that the warships go to Londonderry for repairs. The British express admiration for Krause, for whom it was the first combat outing as a convoy commander. He managed to destroy 4 U-boats. The captain orders the guard to follow the Greyhound into port. Then he hands over command to another officer and retires to his cabin for the first time in more than 2 days. In his cabin, he takes off his uniform, hangs up his cap, and prays, remembering his beloved. Afterward, he lies down on his bed and falls asleep. Warships led by Greyhound confidently dissecting the waters of the Atlantic Ocean, approaching the coast of Britain. The final credits are accompanied by a historical reference. In the Battle of the Atlantic, more than 3,500 ships with millions of tons of cargo were destroyed, and more than 72,000 sailors were killed.